and welcome to Weather Geeks. I'm Dr. Marshall Shepard from the University of Georgia, and I'm speaking today with Dennis Clancy, who's the Deputy Director of Field Operations for Team Rubicon, which is a response organization, a relief organization made up primarily of veterans. Tell us a little bit about the history of your organization.
Sure. We started back in 2010 with the Haiti earthquake. It was two Marines who had just taken off their uniform. They saw everything that was happening in Haiti, and they said, we have to do something, we have to respond.
Right, and so that's kind of the origin. And since then, you've been busy with weather, and here we are on Weather Geeks. 14 hurricanes, 40 tornadoes, 61 floods, 30 severe weather events, and I think you responded recently to the wildfires as well. And if you watch the World Series, the home run for home run, or I forget what it was actually called.
HR for HR.
HR for HR. That was for Team Rubicon. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Harvey and some of the recent events like the wildfires. You're still there, right?
We are. We're also still in Puerto Rico. You know, with Harvey, it was on a level that we didn't anticipate. A lot of people didn't anticipate.
It's an anomaly event beyond people's context.
Yeah, we launched with Harvey with boat operations. There were people, you know, Houston was flooded and there were people stranded in their homes. So we put boats in the water. We rescued as many people as we could. And as those waters receded, we started to do home muck outs, guts. We started demolishing houses even, unfortunately. We will be there for a long period of time. We're going to be there for another 2 years doing home rebuilds.
And that's an important point I want to get across, because we were talking about this off camera. Even though it's out of the news cycle, perhaps some, what you're seeing is still years down the road to come in terms of your involvement, right?
Absolutely. We fundraise best when it's in the news, but we're there for a long period of time afterwards. And there's a lot of important work that happens in that long-term recovery phase.
Yeah. What about the California wildfires? You were saying here we are in early November, and you guys were and your team just left that region. What were you doing there, and why are you leaving?
Yeah, for wildfires, a lot of times we will sift through the remains of a person's house to try to find, help them find their valuables. So we did that with the Fort McMurray fire in Canada last year. In California, there is a huge government response to what has happened there, but we always look to plug in as best we can.
Now, I want to kind of come back to the sort of root of your team and your company. What is it that makes veterans particularly good at this type of relief and response work?
We believe that veterans learn these great skills that you can't replicate outside of the service. We have the best trained military in the world, and they have a great ability to deal with chaos. And we believe that when someone's having the worst day of their life, we can put leaders in front of them, and we can get good outcomes from doing that.
Right. Now, you don't just respond to weather events, even though that's primarily kind of our focus on this show. You recently responded to the earthquakes as well. Tell us a little bit about how an earthquake response differs from, say, a weather response.
Yeah, so earthquakes you don't see coming, right? For a hurricane coming in, there might be flooding for weeks, and so you have a lot of time to prepare, but we have almost 70,000 volunteers in the United States who are standing ready to respond when something happens. So our hope is always to have boots on the ground within 24 hours of something happening.
Now, are you just a short-term recovery, or do you deal in any mid or long-term recovery as well?
We're starting to get into long-term recovery, particularly with Hurricane Harvey. The amount of support we've gotten through our efforts with Hurricane Harvey. We don't want to turn our backs on Texas. There's a lot of great work we can do there. There are a lot of skills that marry well with that disaster response work we do. And it's additional training our people can get, but it's ultimately impact for those disaster survivors.
Now talk to me, I mean, you're involved in operations. There's a significant weather disaster that happens. This is a hypothetical situation a week from now. Walk us through how you mobilize. What happens?
So as soon as we identify a disaster happens, we'll usually send a reconnaissance team. That can be minutes after the disaster in the case of a tornado. That might be a couple days in the case of a large flooding event, based on how quickly we know we can get into the area. But a team is going there to understand what is the need that we can fulfill. Is the local response apparatus overwhelmed? Based on that, we'll scope and scale that response. Depending on how big it is, we might have a regional response, or we might bring people in from all over the country.
Okay, and so who are you? I mean, who contacts you? Who are your customers? Is it a government? Is it an agency? Is it individual businesses or homeowners? Who is your customer?
It's the disaster survivor, whatever that is, and it's different for every disaster. But that's why we send in teams initially to get a sense of, are the people there overwhelmed? What are the needs? How can we plug in to be most successful there? But there are a number of ways that we can make sure that we are part of the total architecture of response. So that's making sure we have good relationships with local emergency managers, state and county emergency managers, and then also, we got to get out in the communities. We have to go and talk to the homeowners and understand what their needs are.
What is your relationship with meteorologists? I mean, are you just following the Weather Channel or others, or how do you get your weather information?
We do have it on every day.
Yeah.
So every morning we have a volunteer who will put together a weather report for that day of different weather systems that we're looking at, maybe things that happened overnight that we have to look at responding to.
Okay. What about your company? I mean, you've been all over the place. CNN, Fox News, World Series is raising funds for you for a good cause. What's your growth like? Are you growing rapidly right now?
So yes, it's been huge, really, since August 27th when we put boats in the water with Hurricane Harvey. We went from 44,000 volunteers to 66,000 volunteers today. So we had a 50% growth in our 7-year company in the last 9 weeks.
Wow. So that's growth. Now, when we come back on Weather Geeks, we're going to talk about how weather plays a role in their operations. And then later on the show, we're going to talk about something that Dennis does that involves bulls and a country called Spain. You don't want to miss that. But first, our Geek of the Week.
This week's Geek of the Week may look familiar. It's Sandra Peterson's. She's a national certified broadcast meteorologist and has appeared on CNN, Good Morning America, and The Today Show. Indra loves a good thunderstorm and is a world-traveled junkie. She also has a very special connection to Team Rubicon. She's married, yes, to the co-founder and its CEO, Jake Wood. Congratulations to Indra Peterson's on Geek of the Week. The Weather Channel is committed to coverage before, during, and after the storm. Starting Thanksgiving Day, the Weather Channel will be auctioning off storm-tested gear that was, for example, used by the likes of Jim Cantore during this past hurricane season. The best part is that all proceeds raised will go to continuing disaster relief efforts. Visit weloveweather.tv/auction to find the list of storm-worn items you can bid on. Help us make sure that the families left with nothing this holiday season are not forgotten. Please join us in forecasting hope.
And we are back on Weather Geeks, and I am talking with Dennis Clancy, and you're with Team Rubicon. Now, we've been talking all about your operation, but tell us a little bit about you. I understand you're at West Point. You spent some time, you're a veteran, so you spent some time, I believe, in Iraq, spent some time at Amazon. Tell us a little bit about you and your background.
I've had a few mini careers. Yeah, I was active duty Army, served in Iraq. After that, I went to work for Amazon for 4 years. I was an entrepreneur after that.
So I want to come at your Amazon. So is that really where you picked up a lot of your operations skill set?
Yeah, definitely. I first went on a deployment with Team Rubicon because they thought I would have a logistics background based on my resume.
Right. So you've been really, then in the next block after the next commercial, we're going to talk about some really interesting things you do in your personal life, and I want to save that for later. You're not going to want to miss this, so stick around. But let's get back now to weather. Is there a particular weather event that you or your team find particularly challenging? I mean, is there something more difficult than another? I'm sure they all have their own unique challenges, but is there something that really gives you a tough time?
A lot of times it's flooding because, the flooding comes in, but it's a while before you can actually get in there. And people see it on the news. There's a lot of pressure to get in there and do something, but the bulk of what we do is once that water recedes, right?
That's an interesting point, because we were talking off camera, and Mike Chesterfield, one of our colleagues here at Weather Geeks, was saying people were saying, wait, when Harvey was like, the day after, it was like, did we overplay this some? But that's kind of the typical response with floods, but they are creeping events that really have sort of a long-term magnitude effect. Is that right? That's what you've seen?
Yeah, and if you don't get in quick enough, mold sets in. You have to demolish homes. It's hard to deal with.
Yeah, so I would imagine that affects the type of response you do. I mean, in other words, a flood response is going to be different than a tornado response, which is going to be different than a wildfire response in terms of the types of logistics and even equipment you're bringing in. Is that correct? Absolutely.
Yeah, it can be more heavy equipment intensive when you have to demolish homes, but that will come later as a later phase of the operation. With a tornado, you're in there with major equipment the next day. You're doing a lot of debris management. But with a flood, you're doing a lot of muck outs, you're doing mold remediation, stuff like that.
I think in 2017, we have seen two of the great humanitarian crises of our time in terms of weather, with both Harvey and Maria. And I think people still don't appreciate the full scale of what Harvey is going to end up. But you were saying that the cost and the sort of impact of this is going to be with us in terms of for a while in Harvey, right? Yeah, and
absolutely.
Yeah. What about Maria? You said you have people on the ground. What are you doing in Puerto Rico?
We're still in Puerto Rico. We're doing medical clinics there because a lot of people are underserved with all their medical needs. The storm a lot of times will exacerbate situations. You might have medical providers that leave or displace themselves, and people are away from their normal support structure. We're also doing a lot of field work, debris management, soil work.
Yeah, and anything going on in Florida with your team?
So we had 3 operations going in Florida. They've finished now, but we were outside of Jacksonville, outside of Melbourne, and outside of Immokalee, Florida.
Yeah, Jacksonville really, with Irma, the storm surge flooding, I think caught many of us by surprise in terms of its magnitude. We knew it would be there. And when we come back on Weather Geeks, I want to talk about some really interesting things that you do personally, like run with the bulls. We're going to talk about that next, and also the backbone of Team Rubicon's team. You're going to hear all about these valiant servants of our country next on Weather Geeks. And we're back and we're talking to Team Rubicon, and I want to talk to you about the slogan for your team. It says, disasters are our business, but veterans are our passion. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's very important within Team Rubicon that we're projecting an image of the veteran which is strong, which is capable. We have millions of people coming off active duty service, and they still have a desire to serve. And we feel that if we can give them community, purpose, and identity, that they can make true impact for their communities.
And I mean, I can't just stop by not saying thank you to any veteran that's out there that's watching the show right now or involved in Team Rubicon's activities. On behalf of all of us here at Weather Geeks and the Weather Channel, we thank you for your service. And I imagine this is really fulfilling and helpful to them as well.
No, absolutely. Yeah. When I took off my uniform, you lose a little of something, yeah, right? And to be able to get back in the field with people that are like you, that understand the camaraderie, it's just an amazing experience.
Now, I want to shift gears a little bit because this fellow has a very impressive resume. He's a filmmaker, and you've made a film called Chasing Red. And one of your passions is running with the bulls. Tell us about how you got into that, and you said you teach people how to do it now?
Yes, yeah, I'm a bull running coach. There are a lot of tourists that come to Pamplona and they want to run with the bulls, but they realize it's so dangerous. They're like, wait, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. So I'm the guy in town that you would talk to who would walk you through different plans of action.
What's Chasing Red about? I mean, I guess I could have guessed, but
it's a character-driven documentary following 4 bull runners through the 8 days of Fiesta. Okay. So they were trying to get very dangerous runs. I was one of them. Largely because I was a first-time filmmaker, sure, and for any mistakes that were made in the filming, I could redo it.
Where can we find this film?
Right now, it's sold on its website, chasingredmovie.com.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something that was interesting to me as we were chatting about the parallels of running with the bulls and some of what you do professionally. Tell us a little bit about that.
Like so many people, I've always wanted to be there on someone's worst day to serve them. And when someone gets to Pamplona and they're nervous and they know they're going to run, but they know something might happen, being that person in the town that can take someone under their wing and show them the way is something that I find very gratifying.
Right. Now, any close calls with the bulls?
Yes.
For you?
Yeah.
Tell us about them.
I've ended up underneath the bulls. That happened this year. They tend to jump over you, so right, that's good, but you're intentionally trying to get close to the horns. You don't want to impede, touch, or aggravate the animal in any way. You want to give it space, but you are trying to get very close to it.
Okay, let's bring Running with the Bulls to Weather Geeks. Any particular weather that's favorable for Running with the Bulls, or is there any particular climate-driven reasons why they do it at the time that they do it, or is it just totally random?
Rain and moisture are the worst. You're running on cobblestone, it's early in the morning, the streets aren't dry. They've just washed down the streets to get all the filth from the party the night before off the street. So you always hope for a dry day.
Right, so optimized conditions or dry day for Running with the Bulls. All right, in this last 20 seconds or so, tell us what's next for Team Rubicon. Team
Rubicon is going to continue to expand. So we already have chapters in other countries, other coalition country. We have these additional chapters, but we're also growing in the United States. We're looking in, for additional ways that we can plug in and have a good impact on behalf of communities.
And I think that's where we have to end it. Again, we want to thank you all for your service. And if you want to support Team Rubicon, they're out there and they need your help. And the country and the world needs what they're doing. We want to thank you for joining us. We're here every Sunday on Weather Geeks. You can also find us on Twitter, WXGeeksTWC, and we're on Facebook. See you next week on Weather Geeks.
What makes me a weather geek, the fact that I love the weather, especially when it's hitting me in the side of the face.
I'm gonna ride this one out, guys.
Be one of the thousands of weather geeks out there at weloveweather.tv.